Dear friends, in the previous video, we learned about the story of Arjuna and how the power of the sound can transform negative consciousness and negative emotions. And today, this is the last class in this series. We will go one step further with the power of the sound, and we will look into the story of a man who was cursed to die. So what happened to him and what was his experience with the power of the sound? So I will begin with the story. This is also a story from ancient times. It is a story about King Parikshit. He's a true personality, a great king who ruled the planet Earth 5,000 years ago. He was a very powerful person, but he was also a saintly person at the same time. So he was ruling in such a way that people were benefited in the most wonderful ways. And he was very just ruler as well. In his times when he was ruling, even the weather was just according to the needs of the people. So there was rain during the night, and during the day, there was sunshine. So it was enough rain for all the crops, but at the same time, there was beautiful sunshine during the day. But his life got into a great turmoil. And this happened one day when he went to the forest for hunting, because the kings in those days, they used to go hunting, and this was actually important for them to show their heroism. Sometimes they were even fighting with tigers barehanded. So he was hunting in the forest, and during this hunting, he became very thirsty and hungry. So he was looking around where he could get some water, and suddenly he found that there was a cottage in the middle of the forest. So he stepped in to the cottage, and he saw a sage, a yogi, who was meditating, deeply in trance. But King Parikshit was very thirsty, and he was actually expecting to get some water to quench his thirst. And he requested the Muni, that yogi, oh, please, can you give me some water? But the sage did not reply. Obviously, because he was not aware of his surroundings. He was in a state of trance, deeply absorbed in his internal meditation. But the king somehow or other became annoyed. And then he stepped outside, and outside he found a skin of a dead snake. And he just, with the stick, he took this skin, and then he garlanded the meditating sage with this skin of a dead snake. And then he left. But he felt that something was terribly wrong. He felt very uneasy, and he couldn't believe why did he behave in such a way, because this was not his normal behavior. His normal behavior was always very polite, very friendly, very according to all the rules of social behavior. And he was actually expecting that probably soon something bad will happen to him because of this misbehavior. So what happened in the meantime, at the cottage, the son of this meditating yogi came, and he saw his father garlanded with that dead snake. And he previously saw the king entering the cottage, and he immediately concluded, this is the king. He did this. He is the culprit. This is so insulting to my father. How dared he? How could he do this? And he pronounced a curse because he was a son of a sage. He actually also had some spiritual power. And by pronouncing this curse, he actually really cursed him to die within 7 days. So in the meantime, the king came back to his home, and soon the news came to him that he was cursed by this little boy to die within 7 days. And the king actually also had a lot of spiritual power, and he could counteract this curse, but he did not. Because he understood that this is a higher power, higher control above, which actually allowed this curse to happen. And he still felt guilty because of his behavior. So he just accepted the curse, and he started preparing to die within 7 days. So how did he prepare? How would you prepare if all of a sudden you would get the news that you will die within 7 days? What would you do? You can think about it. So the king, he immediately took off his royal dress. He left the palace. He renounced his royal throne. He left his family, his beautiful wife, his children, all the opulence, and he went to the sacred river. And he was actually planning to fast until death. So then he sat down on the bank of the holy river, and immediately the sages from all over the world, and not only all over the world, but also from different outer space, from different other planets, started coming. Because even 5,000 years ago, the planet Earth was still visited by higher beings from higher planets. So all the celestial sages also started coming. Why? Because they knew that something very extraordinarily is going to happen, because the king was such a special personality. So he was sitting there and meditating, and all the sages kept coming. So there was like a great assembly already. And then appeared on the scene the most saintly personality, Srila Shukadeva Goswami. He was actually very young, but he was a self-realized person. He was a person who had complete knowledge of all the spiritual truths. So he came and he sat down next to King Parikshit. And King Parikshit immediately recognized him as the most elevated spiritual teacher or guru. And he started asking questions. So what were the questions that he asked? He asked him many, many questions, but in the beginning, he asked several most important questions. And one of them was, what is the duty of a man who is about to die? Because this was his situation. He was just about to die. So what is a man to do if he is about to die very soon? And to answer this question and other questions, Srila Shukadeva Goswami started reciting the most sublime spiritual knowledge, which is now recorded in the book called Srimad Bhagavatam. And this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, describes everything you need to know about who you really are as a spiritual living entity. Where is your real home? What is your real duty? What is this world all about? And all the intricacies of life within this world and of the spiritual path and the journey back to your real constitutional position, back to your real home in the spiritual sky. And not only was this knowledge very powerful spiritually, but it was also very beautiful. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was speaking in very poetic ways. And there were many, many beautiful, most attractive and interesting stories through which he explained difficult philosophical concepts and showed the application in our practical life. So what happened then with King Parikshit? King Parikshit began hearing. And what he was hearing was the transcendental sound vibration. The sound that was being emanated from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami was pure spiritual sound. And King Parikshit took shelter of this sound vibration. He completely absorbed his attention. He was listening with his heart and mind open, completely open. And he became so absorbed, so engrossed in this hearing that he forgot about eating, drinking, and sleeping for 7 days and nights. He was just hearing non-stop. And not only his negative emotions went away, not only they were transformed into positive emotions, but he actually attained unbelievable spiritual ecstasy, spiritual satisfaction, which is obtainable by really taking shelter of the spiritual sound vibration. And after 7 days and 7 nights, when his time came to die, to leave his body, he was completely prepared. And what does this mean that he was prepared? It means that he was ready to go back to the spiritual world, to go back home, back to Godhead, where he came from, where he belongs, where all of us belong. So he qualified himself through this very attentive and absorbed hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he achieved the highest possible goal of human life. So now I would like to analyze a little bit his story, because in the previous video, we spoke about Arjuna and how he was in the beginning completely disturbed, fearful, sad, frustrated, despondent. But then through hearing Bhagavad Gita, all these negative emotions went away and he was really determined and spiritually strong to do his duty. But in this story now, I would like to tell you more about another effect of this powerful spiritual sound. And this is the awakening of your true spiritual nature and of the natural happiness or bliss that the soul is experiencing. And I would like to read one text from Bhagavad Gita, which actually illustrates a little bit this point. This is Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, text number 24. Yonta sukontar aramma statanta jyotir evayaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto digachati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. And the purport says, unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience, and he can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. And this state is called Brahma Bhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. So this is the state that was achieved by King Parikshit. And we can see that just by hearing this powerful spiritual sound, he became completely focused on his internal life. And he relished the internal happiness. So all the external circumstances could not disturb him anymore. And this is something that is so relevant for every one of us, because when we experience negative emotions in this world, we are experiencing them for one main reason. And this reason is that we are looking for happiness in this external material world. And this is why we are vulnerable. And this happiness can never be achieved. And this is why we get frustrated again and again. We get cheated again and again. We get disappointed and sad again and again. We become angry and we are fearful because we are already in expectation. Even if we get some happiness, we are afraid we will lose it. And we will lose it because in the material world, everything is taken away from us. But when we take shelter of the spiritual sound, vibration, like the Bhagavad Gita as it is, or Srimad Bhagavatam, and we regularly either hear the lectures from the teachers who speak from these books, from bona fide spiritual teachers, or when we read these books, when we do this regularly every day for at least half an hour or 1 hour, we will experience transformation, not only in changing the negative emotions into positive, but we will start experiencing this inner satisfaction and inner happiness, which is coming from our soul and which is coming from our personal relationship with the Supreme Soul. This really is the source of unlimited happiness, unlimited bliss. So please give it a try. I will also post in a description box, the link for Srimad Bhagavatam, both for reading and for hearing. You can even just hear the entire book. So give it a try and experience the amazing transformational benefits.